Hello, everyone, and welcome to 180 Degrees of Impact. My name is Matt Scott, and today I am very thankful to be joined by Marilyn Mosley Gordanier. Marilyn, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm in California and it's lovely here. The fires have stopped and we are really having a lovely, beautiful, actually 75-degree day. And
Ooh.
we have orange trees in the background just to kind of welcome you.
I hope anyone who's watching, and I, I actually hope I could, through this interview, live vicariously through you. Maybe get a little bit of the nature sounds in the background, but thank you to Mother Nature for giving us such a beautiful day to do this interview on.
Beautiful.
Amazing. And as we get started, I think just for those who are watching, I know that I unfortunately can't do your introduction justice, so I would love if you could start out by introducing yourself to the 180 Degrees of Impact audience.
I would love to. So it's an interesting thing to introduce yourself, but I have been working in the field of education for 40 years. And really my main area of passion and interest has been working with homeschoolers. So I helped start Oak Meadow, which is one of the first homeschooling programs in the United States in 1974. And came out here from New York to begin that program in California. And then in 1991, I did something that really, I think, was really changed the paradigm of education. We started the first online education homeschooling program in the world and created the first approach to personalized education where children could be anywhere at any time and working on their education. They could either be online or doing text-based. So we created a school for children who had an interest, passion. They were, for various reasons, struggling in school or were an athlete and wanted a different type of education. So we were sort of the pioneers at that time. And we've continued to create educational options using both online and text-based. And now it's no longer, it's an idea whose time has come. And so we have over 8,000 students in our school. And we work with children everywhere for every reason you can imagine. But our main goal is to ensure that they get to experience their joy and their passion for learning.
Oh, wow, that's really interesting. And I know that you have this background in education, and actually the way that I heard of all of your work and of you was through Educate Girls Now. And so I'd really love to know if you could introduce me to the concept of Educate Girls Now, or maybe better to say, how do you explain Educate Girls Now to people you meet?
So that's a very good question. So, excuse me, I like to keep creating new innovative approaches and finding ways to help children to fulfill their passion and their dream. And so in the United States, what it looks like is very different than it would look like in, say, a country like Afghanistan. But all of a sudden, because of a movie, a documentary that my daughter was part of called Girl Rising, she filmed the story of a little girl in Afghanistan named Amina, who was 11 years old and forced to be married, had a baby at 12. And so I had the chance to see all the outtakes over and over again, and I was just mortified because here I've been working with children, but not children suffering like this. So I said to my daughter, I really need to help. I don't know how to help because I've worked with children in 54 countries, but I've never worked with children in Afghanistan. And so she put me in touch with Zarguna Kargar from the BBC. And she had created worked with the young girl on the script for this movie. And Zari, as we call her, said, I've always believed that if you can feed a family and give the money to the mother, you can ensure that the child will go to school, especially girls. And so we decided to start. And what we discovered was that some families are living on 80 cents a month for food.
Mm-hmm.
So when they sell their daughters in marriage, it's survival. And if they have the option of going to school and having food, they don't sell their children.
Yeah.
And here's the thing I think this has been the innovation of everything we've done is we give the money to the mothers only. And I don't want that to sound in any way prejudiced, but we've discovered that the mothers are very dedicated to their children and connected to the well-being of their children. And so if the money is given to the mothers with the understanding that that money can only be used for food, clothing, care, shelter, and in exchange the children go to school, which is what the parents want, the mothers want, and the fathers too, then it works. And it has been like a miracle. To date, we have had 289 children go through our program, and we've only had one child early on where there was an issue and it was really out of our control because it was a Taliban related situation. And so what we've discovered is that parents want their children to go to school, but they need them to be fed. So if we feed the children, if we provide them with shelter, clothing, they go to school.
Wow.
And so there has been not one child who's been taken out of the program because of that. And the mothers are completely devoted to getting their children to school, and the children are growing and they're healthy, and they want to be in school more than anything. They want an education.
Yeah, it's really inspiring to hear, especially just from a broader perspective, and considering that a lot of people who are watching this, of course, are familiar with who you are and with Educate Girls Now and with all of the work that you've done in the education world. But a lot of them are also just social entrepreneurs or people who are interested in impact. And the inspirational part for me, especially, is that you had this massive and still have this massive problem right in front of you, and yet you found this really innovative solution. And I really admire that. I'm glad that you explained how you actually got to the place of using food again as that mechanism to create change. And I'll also say one thing I didn't mention before the interview is I was introduced to Girl Rising in 2013 when it came out because I was a student at George Washington University here in Washington, D.C. at the time, and that I believe was my senior year. In my senior year, I was the president of Students Against Sexual Assault on campus, and we had a film screening and a panel after where we were really discussing the stories and the impact of the film. So like I still remember the focus on the nine girls and their 9 stories, and it's powerful to see that you really created something because of that film and that story and your daughter's experience too. I'd love to know though, when you first were getting started, just going back to food, when did you know that food would be that, some might say like a forcing function, so to speak, or how did you know food would be that mechanism? Or when did you know food would be that mechanism?
Well, really from the beginning, it was Zari who said to me, these people are starving. And in many cases, we are working with widows. Husbands have been killed in the Afghan war. And that leaves them in a very precarious position. It's not the same as in the United States. If your husband is killed, either you have to marry a member of the family or you're banned from the family. So many of these women were starving and their children were starving. And Zari, who lives in the UK and is a BBC World reporter, explained to me that this is the commodity that is that is the most needed, that these families are begging for food and need food. So she felt that if we used food, we fed the family. There's a thing called Bloom's taxonomy. If you take care of the very greatest needs.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else follows. So if we could feed the family, and if we could make sure that children had enough clothing, they could go to school. And it was really her understanding. I wish I could say it was me, but I didn't have that experience. I didn't know what it meant to starve.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was right. And she said they just need food, and that will make the difference for many of these families.
Mm-hmm. You started to touch on it a little bit at the beginning in your introduction about, like, the experience that you had with education in the U.S. and also in a bunch of countries, but not in Afghanistan. What were those unique challenges that you had, or what was the learning curve like as you adapted to the work that you were doing in Afghanistan?
So in the United States, in Japan, in Korea, all of the students, to a great extent, had the basic requirements of life. They had food and clothing, and they were looking at their future in terms of, where do they want to be in life and what they want to do. And our goal was to help them to achieve their goals and dreams and aspirations. That's always been my focus.
Mm-hmm.
In this country, the first thing we were dealing with was they had no food.
Yeah.
And then we found out that they had no shoes to go to school. They had flip-flops, and that they didn't have jackets. So all of a sudden, I was dealing with the most basic needs of a family. They were living in burnt-out mosques.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to reframe my perspective. What I did believe, and I really truly believe this stays the same for every child, is they want to achieve their goals and dreams, and that they have goals and dreams, and that is more important. That means so much to them. And so as soon as we were able to provide them with the very basics, what came out in their emails to us and their letters was such great relief that they had the opportunity now to fulfill their opportunity to potentialize themselves, to be whom they really want to be.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes so much sense. My shock was what I shared with you, which is I never worked with people who were in absolute dire need.
Yeah. I think that it sounds so difficult, the work that you were doing. It's incredibly important work, but I guess that's why it's so important, because there are all of those challenges. And maybe this is a tough question, but how did you decide that you had to get involved and that you had to be the one to do this work? And in other words, I guess I'm wondering, I meet a ton of people, and I think a lot of people meet a lot of people who have ideas or have an inkling or have a passion, but it's one thing to have a passion and another thing to take action. So I'd love to know, what was that switch for you that took you from this incredible interest and awareness in seeing the film and all of the edits to actually taking action?
That's a really good question. So, and it's a very important question, because there are so many things that happen in life where I even think, oh my God, that's so overwhelming. How can I make a difference? And then I thought about something Pope Francis said that was really beautiful. He had brought over 12 refugees from I don't know exactly where, but he brought over 12 refugees, and people said, that's only 12 refugees. And he said, yes, it may be a drop in the ocean, but every drop makes a difference. And I thought, whatever I'm going to do, it's going to be a drop in the ocean, but I can make a little difference in somebody's life. And so I feel very, very fortunate, because I had the right people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had my daughter who was filming the film. I had Zari to work with me, who understood the culture. It wasn't even a question to me. As soon as I heard about the issue, the need was so great. It was more like a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And I just felt like I was supposed to be there. And it's not something I've ever experienced before. So it just is. I just thought these little girls need an opportunity. And this was presented to me, so I figured it was mine to hold on to. I kind of have that feeling like if you're given a problem, then it must be yours to take, deal with. If it was given to someone else, then it would be theirs, because there are issues that aren't mine to take on. And I had the good fortune of having my daughter Rama and Zari, who could really help me to set up the program, and then wonderful people who have donated their time and energy.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow, that's incredible to hear. And it's, that's a really important question and important response, because there are a lot of people, I think, even me to an extent, like I have 108 degrees of impact, and I'm doing this work to talk with people like you and have conversations and share them. And as I was saying to you before, have it so that the people who are watching feel like they're part of the conversation, like they're in a coffee shop with us and they're that third seat that's sitting there, for instance. But a lot of people also think, is it me? Should I be the one to make this impact in Afghanistan? One thing that I found really interesting, though, about your response was this idea of this massive undertaking making an impact in Afghanistan. And I'd love to know at least a little bit from you, because I'm sure that you could probably write a book on this. What were some of the challenges that you faced when it came to the culture and navigating that in your work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So first of all, I knew very little. I was coming into it with a very, with the mindset that didn't understand the culture, and I have so much to learn. One of the important things about the culture is that you're accepted by not only the people who are helping to run the program, but that the individuals feel comfortable working with you. Mm-hmm. And so it took time to build up a sense of support from the community that we were okay, that we were good, that we were worthwhile people and trustworthy, because people really care about what their neighbors say. Mm-hmm. And so that was one of the beginning issues. The other was we had to find an organization to work with us in Afghanistan, because Zari lives in the BBC, I live in the US, and unfortunately it's not been very safe for either of us to travel there. Mm-hmm. Started with an organization that we felt would represent us and help us to manage the families that we believe needed help. And it turned out that they were not ethically of the same caliber that we'd hope. Mm-hmm. So we quickly switched to something that is very unusual. So Zari had 2 BBC reporters in Kabul.
Oh, wow.
And of all things, we decided that they were the most trustworthy, they were passionate, they loved the idea, they wanted to be involved, and they loved these children. And so they became our team leaders. Uh-huh. And they've been incredible. They visit the families monthly. They stay in touch with them during the month. They have been incredibly caring, honest, and supportive, and alerted us when there's a need. So we moved away from working, and I don't want to say this because this isn't true of everybody, but we found for us, it wasn't the government agency that was our greatest support. It was the individual people.
Right.
And they have been incredible, and the families adore them. And they've been there for them and supported them and kept us abreast. So we moved ourselves to working with people. Mm-hmm. People who really care deeply about the needs of these children. And that was, all of it, every single step of the way was a new discovery for me. And that was a big one.
Yeah.
And first we started with one woman, one BBC reporter, and then we decided it wasn't safe for her to be out by herself. So we asked another BBC reporter, a male, if he would accompany her and be her support. Now we have a male and female team working together.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting because if you were to ask me where to start, if you were to say to me, Matt, we need you to go start an organization in Afghanistan or anywhere outside the US, or let alone, Matt, go start an organization in any place that's not where I've been or experienced, I would probably have a hard time just understanding how to adjust and adapt. And I think to a point you touched on, how to establish something that is respectful, building trust, ethical. For people who are watching, what advice do you have when it comes to doing work that might not be like in your home country or in your own community? Do you have certain advice, wisdom when it comes to starting something that's not in your own backyard, so to speak?
I think one of the things that happened for us was really stepping in and putting aside my own ideas of what I thought would be the right way to go, and really listening to the people and understand and talking to lots of people who've worked in Afghanistan. Not only the people that we work with, but I've met many people, and I've been so grateful to them to help me to understand the culture a little bit better, because I really know that I have a long way to go. And that helped me so much to understand how to talk to our people, to not make assumptions about the way that they were handling situations, to understand their needs, their concerns. And in that process, I think that each month is a growing experience. And for example, this month I was hoping to go to Afghanistan for the first time, and there's been 2 bombings, and that trip was delayed. And so each step of the way has been a process of working with, okay, what do we do this week, and how do we make this work? And also, how do we work with the needs of the mothers? I was thinking I should share this with you. At the beginning, we for some mothers, we could give them the funds, and they would go get the food, and then we could meet with them families after. But we had mothers who were widows who weren't allowed out of the house, and so we had to go get the food for them.
Wow! Yeah, I had no clue personally, and that's something that I wouldn't even think about. And I know culture, I'm sure there are a lot of restrictions, but just that piece of it, which in my mind, and I'm sure for a lot of people in the U.S., you wouldn't even think, like, if you're a widow, or if you're really, everyone should be able to leave the house. That's what I would hope, but even something like that, I wouldn't even know how to navigate that, and so I'm glad that you're sharing that.
Yes, it was a big, it was a really new experience. So, but the triumph of it, from my perspective, is a number of these women who at the beginning wouldn't go out, after a few months of having their own funds, started saying, I can go to the market myself. Then we didn't have to go for them. And then all of a sudden they're saying, I think I can go to the bank and pick up the money myself. So they were empowered by having the ability to care for their family. So we watched them go from feeling powerless to taking charge. Wow. And that has been really beautiful. So we have no families right now that we have to provide them with their food. Everyone has grown to the point where they can go to the market. And in some cases now, they've started their own little markets. They've even bought a sewing machine and started to create little industries.
Oh, wow.
So it's beautiful to see when you have opportunity and choice, as they have now been given things. I believe it's the strength of the human spirit. They've taken it and used it to create a better life for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that it reminds me of just that idea that yeah, there are a number of organizations that also speak what you were saying earlier, like the power of women in these situations when you give them these resources. Or like I think of an organization by the name of Kiva, which gives microloans, and when they give these microloans to women, they have a higher repayment rate. Women actually using the funds in the way that they agree to, or using them responsibly, so to speak. And then I also think of just all of the stories of how there is all the struggle and all the injustice. Like we could look at Girl Rising. We could look at the book Half the Sky was actually a book that I read years ago. But it's really inspiring to see that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and with the work that you're doing, it's having a positive impact. And so, I guess just to follow up from that, I know more about the impact of the work that you're doing, but I'm curious from just your experience, what are some of the things you have learned from the communities that you've worked with? Well, I just said the question, so I'm not prefacing the question, but I'll just add that I think a lot of the time people will look at a community that's not their own, that's not in the US, that is being supported with work like this, and view these girls and women as, for lack of a better term, helpless or less powerful. What are some of the ways that you've seen experience that power, and what are some of the things that you've learned from working with them?
It's a really good question. Well, it's interesting. This is a really good interview for me because it gives me a chance to think about it. And in a lot of ways, I think human beings they want to self-actualize. So what I see with these girls is maybe the way their life will look may be different than in the US. But what do they want? They don't want to be stuck. They want to have an education. They want to have a house. They want to go to school and create the goal they have in their lives. They want to take care of their parents. And they want to make sure that they never in their lives are put into a position where they are less than who they believe they are. And so what I see is that given an opportunity, they're just like every other child. They just want to help each other, and they want to be the best. And it makes me think there's a group, and I can't really share the province because it's a Taliban area, and we're not allowed to delineate their area. But this is a young girl and her sister, and they have started with the money that we provided. Not only are they going to school, and they can't go to a school, there are no schools, so they have a tutor, but they've now invited all the girls in their neighborhood to come and learn with them. And when I wrote a letter to one of the little girls, and I said, I am worried that you're taking on a big challenge, and that we're responsible for you in some way. And I said, and you're in danger. And she said, I'm always in danger, but at least now I'm learning to read. I was once blind, but I'm not blind anymore. And so it just made me realize that deep desire to be more, to actualize and to help others was so empowering. It makes you happy if you are supporting her and she knows that we're behind her. But imagine to have the courage to do that. It's so powerful.
Yeah. And it's like that really for some reason that story and that piece really hit me, because it's, I mean, obviously we see this with Educate Girls Now, but with a lot of organizations and efforts now. I mentioned being involved with campus sexual assault, for instance. And one thing that's sad is that we have to do the work, but I'm really glad people are doing the work to ensure that we have spaces that are more, where just in general, where this injustice isn't happening, where people have access to education and to what you and I might, have experienced as basic necessities, or, basic rights, even when it comes to our work and lives. So it's emotional thinking about it, but I guess that's part of why I do 108 Degrees of Impact, to hear from people like you, so that in the news or in other places, when we see this happening, just to be reminded that there are also people like you who are making a positive difference in the face of it all. So we're moving closer and closer to whenever it is not having this issue of having to find a way to get girls access to education.
Yes, well said. I think what I hear you saying is you are empowering others to really take a risk and take a stand and to make a difference. Like, what if we only reach 289 girls? Now, only, it sounds little, but that's a lot. Those are 289 lives.
Mm-hmm.
That could be changed, and the lives of their children and the families and the community. You don't know what this will do and what it will bring. And that's why I always feel like it's so important to take that jump, that leap.
Yeah. Oh, wow. And just speaking of that leap, and that you mentioned the 289 girls, and that is a large number. Like, one person is a big number to impact. And, that is sometimes how it happens, based on different circumstances. Like, I interviewed someone who, his name's Ian Rosenberger, and he has an organization, actually 2 organizations now, but one of them is called Thread International, and another is called, it was formerly Team Tassi, now it's called Work, but they do work in Haiti with the community. And it all started really with Ian right after the Haiti earthquakes, I believe in 2009, meeting one person by the name of Tassi and really forming a bond. And that has scaled into supporting and impacting so many families' lives and empowering them, in a sense, to find economic opportunities. And but that reminds me, just thinking of your story, as part of one of my last questions, which I mentioned before the interview. I'd love to know, if your life were a book or documentary, when you finish, let's say, finish the work with Educate Girls Now, and we don't need to go out of our way to get girls access to education, what would the title of that book or documentary be, and why?
That's a great question, because I've been writing a book about my life story.
Mm-hmm.
The title has been the hardest part for me. I've just struggled with the title, and I keep going back to this, and I don't know that this is the title, but I think it's Where I Am in Myself, and that is, I keep thinking about chasing destiny. And what does that mean? Like, am I fulfilling the most that I can fulfill? Am I running forward, running towards helping to a greater good? And will each step of the way bring me closer to making somebody's life better than it was? And hopefully it will, and hopefully it does. And every day is a surprise. So I feel like, in a way, I'm kind of I'm just running along, chasing and continuing to create opportunities.
Yeah, but I'm sure it's just like with any chase or any run or any race, it's, sometimes exhausting, but it's important. And one day I hope that means the fact that you're chasing this, that one day you will catch it. And like I was saying, you will like reach the end point where it's this beautiful moment where you realize that all of your work has really achieved everything that I'm sure like your wildest dreams when it comes to what you're doing.
Thank you. I feel like, yeah, and I do. I feel like I do, and then I think, I hear more, and I want to do the next thing. Mm-hmm. Maybe racing destiny, because there's so many opportunities, and for me, it's a really joyful chance to be part of the support system to make this a better world, mm-hmm. Make it a lighter place for people to live.
Yeah, and that's what's important. Like even if it is only 289 girls, for instance, that's still mm-hmm. achieving that goal. And I think that's a good way to look at it. Like I feel like there's always something that we could chase, but it's good to take a step back and to be mindful to an extent, and to think, okay, what I've done is great. And if this is all I'm doing, then, I'm proud of that. And I could be at least a little bit content with that. I don't know. I like the idea of chasing the next.
Me too. And I, for example, we have like 9 families on our wait list. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they're in such great need, we just don't wait. We just take them and just do our best fundraise. Like we just had a young family, 29-year-old widow with 7 children, and we just had to take her. But we're always, that is our goal, is to be able to fulfill the needs of as many families as we can. And mm-hmm. hopefully the ones that come to us are, given an opportunity. So mm-hmm. I mentioned that because anyone who feels a desire to help us, support us in any way, whether it's helping us with fundraising or just helping us by sharing the message, I think it's a really great message of goodness.
Yeah, and where can people find out more about all of the work you're doing, speaking of supporting?
Go to educategirlsnow.org.
Okay.
We're also on Twitter. We have a really, really, really good Twitter handle, and that's one of our busiest areas. But you can find out a lot about what we're doing, and sign up for our newsletter, because we send out a newsletter with the latest photos. We're really lucky. Our team sends us photos every month. Oh, wow. So we get to share those with with anybody who's interested.
Amazing. And I hope people follow you on social media, sign up for the newsletter, visit the website. And as we wrap up the interview, which flew by really quickly, I'll also just say, for anyone who wants to learn more about 180 Degrees of Impact, the website is www.lets.care, and on all of the social media @LetsYouCare. But thank you again for this conversation. It's been really great, and I'm happy to say that I think I'm living vicariously through you. I see the sun rays coming through, and I feel warmed by not just your background, but by your presence. So I really appreciate it.
I feel the same way. I hope I get to meet you in person.
Yeah, one day, that's the goal. Hopefully I'll meet everyone who I get to chat with, but and hopefully, thinking of the people who are watching, they get to meet you as well. But until then, and until next time, as I always say to end these interviews, keep impacting. And thank you again, Marilyn, for this interview.
Thank you so much. It's been truly a pleasure.